This article is the final version of my Master's in Research dissertation, in which I take a journey starting from the evidence that I find in Professor Craig Keener, that there are indeed significant examples of modern miracles. In the appendix of this dissertation, I note 125 examples of modern miracles which clearly have full medical records prior to the miracle, and full medical records after the miracle. And such miracles overwhelm the evidential argument against miracles that David Hume proposes. And in fact, modern philosophy has come to the conclusion that David Hume's argument against miracles is essentially an evidential argument. All other forms of it won't work because they're circular arguments in which you've assumed there can't possibly be a miracle and therefore there are no miracles. But the one part of his argument that can work is the evidential one, that it is very hard to believe that a miracle has taken place because they are so improbable against all that we have seen and known of the world. But when you have the sort of documentary evidence that modern miracles can give us, then that level of skepticism no longer seems reasonable. So having established that there are modern miracles that overwhelm the evidential argument against miracles, we then move on to what are the consequences. Well, one obvious consequence is that we can no longer assume that this world is a closed world, that is, a world which only has material or physical causes. We live in a world which seems to be impacted by supernatural causes, and these supernatural causes can create miracles. Now, if, as I suspect is strongly the case, almost all the miracles that are of the significant variety that have evidence of prior to the miracle from medical records, evidence after the miracle with medical records, are taking place in the context of Christianity, then we have a very good reason to believe that the cause of these supernatural miracles is the God of Christianity. Once we've come to the conclusion that the God of Christianity is the author of these miracles, and we know now that we no longer live in a closed universe that the scientists have given to us, then we can assume that the Bible is indeed an accurate revelation from God. It's certainly what the Bible says internally about itself, that miracles were intended to authenticate God's revelation to humans. And therefore it is perfectly reasonable to assume that the Bible has been authenticated by historic miracles and now by modern miracles. And indeed that's what's in reality happening in much of Asia and Africa. The growth of the church in these countries has often been accompanied by people experiencing miracles. Heidi Baker in northern Mozambique has seen incredible results when she's gone into non-Christian villages, preached the gospel, and in the context of that, someone gets healed and the whole village becomes Christian. Or the evidence from Nepal, where some of the folks there say it looks like 70 to 80% of the new converts to Christianity in Nepal have come about because people have witnessed or experienced miracles. So the idea that modern miracles authenticate the Bible is perfectly consistent with what's really happening on the ground. That then leads to the final conclusion. What should we do? Well, I have suggested the academic community should be researching the subject far more seriously and far more urgently. Why? Because if the Bible has been authenticated by modern miracles, then we need to look at the message of the Bible. And it's very clear from Jesus that one of the prime messages was, you need to escape hell. You need to escape eternal judgment. Jesus speaks on this in numerous occasions. In one of my appendices deal with this. 29 times Jesus talks about eternity, and almost all of them in the context of avoiding eternal destruction, eternal judgment. And the same can be seen in Mark, Luke, and John. And so if Jesus thinks this is a really important topic, then it's important that the academic world takes note. I do a little risk assessment at the end of this article, which I say, assuming that death in a risk assessment is considered the worst outcome and is assigned a value of 5 out of 5, we must assume that eternal judgment is 1,000 times worse than that. And therefore, in our risk assessment, if we do nothing to prevent people from going into hell, then we have a massive risk on our hands. And so what we need to do in the academic world is provide people with the information and the knowledge they need to avoid going into hell. Now, ultimately, it's everyone's individual choice, but at the moment the academic world is doing everything in its power to tell people there is no God, or to simply write them out of the script. But that's not right. The academic world should be actually telling the students and the rest of the world, there is a God, here's the evidence. And that's their proper role. That's the role that God assigned to them. And it's a bit like when Jesus said of the lawyers, you were given the keys of knowledge, and you wouldn't go in, and you locked the door so the people of Israel couldn't go in. They had all the evidence that Jesus was the Messiah, for the miracles that he was doing. And yet the lawyers and all the learned people of Israel refused to acknowledge that Jesus is the Messiah. And as a consequence, they didn't get the salvation they could have had, but even worse, they locked the door so that no one else could get in and have salvation. And the state of Israel was constantly asking at the time of Jesus, is this the Messiah? Is this the Messiah? But our leaders won't tell us he's the Messiah. And as a result, as we saw at the crucifixion, the people cried, crucify him, because the leaders had failed to do the job they were supposed to do, which was tell the people of Israel, this is the Messiah, he's fulfilled the criteria of the Messiah. Well, today we have an opportunity for our leaders and our academics to tell the world that we have seen the evidence. The evidence is that God is real. The evidence is that modern miracles support the Bible as being a divine revelation from God. And now it's time for the academic world and our leaders to tell the nation, this is the truth. Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. And no one can come to the Father except through him. Well, thank you for listening.